And the line this week from the Magnificat is from verse 50, Luke 1 verse 50. His mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. On Wednesday, this text from Mary's song took me to Peter, working with that word fear, which is also present in that passage of the shepherds, that sense of awesomeness and fear. And on Wednesday, it took me to that moment in the Sea of Galilee when Peter had taken Jesus out to get away from the crowds a wee bit, and cast his nets in, the fish came in, filled the boat, and Peter realised who it was that was before him, and he fell at Jesus' feet, spoke of his fear, and yet Jesus lifts him up and says, "Do not fear." Luke 5. In the Wednesday podcast, I sat with that moment of being honestly before Jesus and yet being lifted up. And I realised in the shortness of that word that I had not turned to Mary, this young woman who sings the song. What is her experience of this word? His mercy extends to those who fear him. How does she experience that? And to answer that one, I think we need to turn to the word mercy more than fear. We're maybe used to that word mercy being spoken of in the context of law. Someone is guilty and yet what they deserve is not given to them, and a sentence is not passed down, they are let go. But that isn't really the feel of the New Testament word or its background in the Old Testament. When the psalmist sings in Psalm 100 verse 5, he sings, "For the Lord is good and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations," which echoes, Mary will echo these words in her own song. And in Chronicles, when the Chronicle writes, "Give thanks to the Lord for he is good, his love endures forever." And when the prophet speaks, Jeremiah in 33 says, "The sounds of joy and gladness will ring out. Give thanks to the Lord Almighty, for the Lord is good, his love endures forever. And I will restore the fortunes of the land." When they sing, "His love endures forever," it is that same thought that is carried on into the New Testament word of mercy. We need a longer way of saying this than just a single word. It is a covenant word. It's a word which speaks of a promise given by God to his people that he will never leave them nor forsake them. It is a word of steadfast holding, of faithfulness to promise, of commitment to love, word that is spoken of, known and lived through all generations. One of my favourite prophets is Hosea, and he lives in the midst of this covenant promise of God to his people. Hosea has this relationship with his wife which is broken and then redeemed through faithfulness, and he lives out this promise, and that will culminate in the glorious affirmation, chapter 11, of the promised commitment of the Lord to, despite his people turning away from him. In chapter 11 of Hosea, there's that moment where the Lord speaks through Hosea and says, "My heart is changed within me, and all my compassion is aroused for my people who have left me." These words, which to me point to the moment of the cross, is the utter expression of the compassion of God in the face of rejection. But in an earlier word, in Hosea 6, this is where we get the call to mercy as the word that Mary will also sing. In chapter 6, Hosea says this. He said, what can I do with you, Ephraim, Israel? What can I do with you, Judah? You people that keep turning away, your love is like the morning mist, like the early dew that just disappears. I cut you into pieces with my prophets, with the words of my mouth. This is what you need to hear. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. The Lord cries out to his people who have abandoned him, who have turned to other ways. The Lord calls to them through the words of the prophets, but they disappear. But this is the call, not to bring your sacrifices to the Lord, not to do the rituals of faith. This is what the Lord desires. This is what he wants. This is what he seeks for you. Practice mercy, to live as the Lord lives. And within the promise given by God to his people, we are to live within this word, never leave them nor forsake them, and to live that. That word of steadfast holding, of faithfulness to promise, of commitment to love, that is spoken of, known of, and lived in through all generations. A life that is not directed to the Lord to the detriment of those around you, but a life lived in a practice of mercy to those around you, through which you will follow the desire of the Lord. God's mercy towards you is holding you in covenant, in promises of faithfulness and loving kindness. That is the means by which you are called to live in such promised faithfulness and love to those around you. When Jesus is challenged by the Pharisees in Matthew 9, when he's sitting down with Matthew at the table, Matthew who's been a tax collector and has lived a difficult life, and the Pharisees see him and come in and challenge him in this. This is Jesus' word to them. They challenge him on this. He picks up on the word from Isaiah, says, "Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice." So when Mary sings, his mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. My thoughts today are no longer in the moment of Peter and all the vibrant possibilities of that experience of being lifted up, of hearing Jesus' words, "Don't fear." My thoughts are now with Mary, and she sings this because she knows what it is to live in this mercy. She knows what it is to live in this covenant faithfulness, this committed love that will not let her go. And more than this, she is also living out this call to the promise of such mercy. She lives mercy. There are three moments of such commitment in Mary's life that are within the Gospels. In Luke 2, that moment where Mary and Joseph have presented Jesus just 12 days after his birth in the temple and do all that they need to do, and Simeon the prophet has been there for years waiting in this moment. He comes up and speaks to Mary and says, "This child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel and be a sign that will be spoken against. Hearts will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too." She will live the whole of her life with her son Jesus, and this word that his life will bring a sword to pierce her soul, and yet her mercy commits her to follow him. And at the cross, 33 years later, Mary is at the foot of the cross to see her child crucified. And Jesus places her care into the hands of John in John 19. Mary standing at the foot of the cross, watching as her son is crucified, is an act of mercy to hold someone in promise of loving, steadfast commitment. Whatever is taking place, she does not let him go. And then finally we see Mary again in the book of Acts 1:14, where after the resurrection and all the disciples go back to her place, her house, back to where she is, in the upper room where the disciples gather after the resurrection and the ascension, she is there through all things. It seems to me that Mary lives to the Lord's desire for mercy. She sang it before the birth of Jesus. She lived to the covenant faithfulness and love that stayed throughout the birth and the life and the death and the resurrection of her son, despite the sword that pierced her soul. And so from Wednesday, I think in Peter with all the possibilities that open up in that moment of awe before the Lord. And from today, I think in Mary, who lived out this gift of mercy, of steadfast promise commitment to another across a whole life. And I see a whole world in that. A whole way of living to the Lord that opens up in this song of Mary, between Peter and Mary. A world that is opened up through this line. His mercy extends to those who fear him. And so I'm praying as I respond to these words. I pray that I would keep coming to the Lord in awe, with all the possibilities that come when the Lord lifts us up. And I pray that I would live fully to his mercy and hear the call of that to live out mercy to those around me, to hold them in promise and love and commitment, steadfast love that holds to the promise of God. Even when swords pierce our souls too, we commit in the promises of God to love those around us. That's the word I hear in this line of Mary's song, the Magnificat.